At 2:23 in the morning, three FP-1 unmanned aircraft from Ukraine entered the waters controlled by Russia, flying at a speed of 180 kilometers per hour. Their target was a Russian reconnaissance ship that had been monitoring and disrupting Ukraine's drone operations. The ship was anchored about 15 miles off the coast of Novorossiysk, equipped with an R-381T antenna system specialized in signal interception. For 6 weeks, the Russian vessel had been recording Ukrainian activities and was only a few days away from being able to accurately predict future attacks. That night, the sea was calm until everything changed within seconds. One Ukrainian FP-1 drone skimmed just 3 meters above the water, heading straight for the Russian ship. Its plywood body gave it a radar signature smaller than a seagull's, making it virtually invisible to systems designed to detect metal aircraft. About 20 minutes after takeoff, a Russian four-post R reconnaissance drone appeared on the horizon, flying its standard patrol route about 30 kilometers off the Ukrainian coast. The MX-15DI camera, made in Canada and mounted on the four-post, could detect a basketball from 5 kilometers away, and in thermal mode, it could register a temperature difference of only 2 degrees Celsius. At 2:45, the system detected 3 small, low-flying objects, moving eastward at 180 kilometers per hour. Russian technicians zoomed in to identify the targets, but at that moment, the FP-1's automatic evasion mode activated. The drones dropped to just 2 meters above the surface, blending into the radar clutter from the waves, making it impossible for Russian radar to distinguish them. Because the plywood frames cooled quickly, the drone's temperature soon matched that of the sea, and the Russian thermal cameras could no longer see them. The Russian operator assumed they were a flock of birds, logged the contact, and continued the patrol unaware that he had just allowed the first strike force to pass through. Moments later, Russian Shahed drones located the FP-1 launch site and attacked. Ukrainian operators narrowly escaped before 50-kilogram warheads destroyed all their equipment. Although the Russian surveillance network was active, it was not fast enough to respond to what was about to happen. By 3:30 in the morning, as the FP-1s were crossing the Black Sea, 20 more unmanned naval drones from Ukraine were launched towards Sevastopol, moving at 80 kilometers per hour. This was a large-scale deception plan. Small boats modified from jet skis and cheap civilian vessels, each costing less than $10,000, but designed to look identical to Ukraine's Mira V5 naval drones on radar. They kept perfect formation, transmitted false radio signatures, and moved at attack speed, making Russian radar operators believe this was the largest naval drone assault since October 2022. To make the illusion convincing, Ukrainian engineers replicated real attack behavior, splitting formations, converging on targets, performing evasive maneuvers, even feigning retreat. Initially, the drones were controlled by satellite for the first 50 kilometers, then switched to autonomous mode. Some were even fitted with artificial heat sources to imitate the infrared signature of armed drones. The entire deception was flawlessly executed, and it was this plan that made Russia fall into the trap, exposing its most valuable intelligence asset without realizing it. The Russian admiral had 6 Ka-27PL helicopters stationed at Novorossiysk and 4 more at Sevastopol. These helicopters were the main line of defense for the Black Sea Fleet against unmanned surface vehicles. Warships were too slow to chase them, and fighter jets couldn't hover to search, but helicopters could move fast and scan effectively, able to cover 100 kilometers in 20 minutes. Without helicopter support, the approaches to Novorossiysk were nearly defenseless. According to Russian combat doctrine, they must respond first to any visible threat. All 6 helicopters at Novorossiysk took off toward the west at 270 kilometers per hour to intercept what they believed were attacking drones. Every minute they flew westward was another minute the real Ukrainian drones flew eastward without opposition. By the time the Russians realized they'd been deceived, their helicopters had been drawn 360 kilometers off course. The Russian spy ship, anchored about 15 miles off the coast, now had no air cover, no rapid response unit, and no way to redirect helicopters to investigate new radar contacts. For the next 2 hours, any drone that slipped past patrol boats would have a clear path to strike. Meanwhile, The three FP-1 drones adjusted their course 15 degrees north, a deliberate maneuver. After months of observation, Ukrainian operators had learned that two Russian Podlet K-1 radar stations covered this sector. Each radar completed 10 rotations per minute, like two searchlights sweeping the sky. For 4 seconds each minute, both beams pointed away from the same spot, leaving a 2-kilometer-wide blind corridor, the only safe path the drones had to fly through. But the Russians had adapted, introducing randomized desynchronization to eliminate predictable blind spots, shrinking the corridor further. The first drone entered at 4:47, disappearing for 4 seconds, briefly reappearing for 2, then vanishing again. The second drone, 30 seconds behind, stayed on course, still invisible. The third drone, however, developed a problem. A tiny flaw in its autopilot gyroscope caused it to drift 200 meters to the right. At 4:48, Russian radar operators switched to a random rotation pattern. The third drone corrected sharply northward, burning valuable fuel. It re-entered the collapsing corridor at 4:49, and both radars painted it clearly. The operator saw a small, fast-moving target and marked it as a possible bird before returning to track the larger decoy swarm. That maneuver cost the third drone about 12 minutes of fuel, meaning it would reach the target area with less than 1 minute of flight time left. The spy ship remained on station 15 miles offshore, guarded by 2 Project 03160 patrol boats, circling at a 5-kilometer radius. The ship's radar could see threats the patrol boats couldn't, directing them like a quarterback calling plays. By 5 o'clock, the decoy fleet carried out its final act. 20 decoys scattered in every direction. Some ran aground, others circled until they ran out of fuel, and a few simply stopped moving. None aimed for real targets. Their mission was complete: to draw helicopters and ships away. The Russian helicopters chased them, wasting fuel and ammunition on targets cheaper than a single depth charge. When the helicopters finally returned, they were 180 kilometers from Novorossiysk with half their fuel gone. Morning fog thickened, further reducing visibility, a silent ally for the attackers. At 6 o'clock, the lead FP-1 drone, now 240 kilometers from its target, began to drift east even though it hadn't turned. The Russians had activated the R-380ZHTO system from Crimea. This wasn't crude jamming. It broadcast fake GPS signals at higher power, tricking the drone's navigation system into following false coordinates instead of real satellites. The result, the drones began to veer off course, some even being guided straight toward Russian Pantsir air defense batteries. In short, Ukraine's deception worked perfectly. Fake drones had tricked radar and helicopters, draining Russian fuel and weakening their defense, while the real FP-1 drones, small, wooden, and inexpensive, crept closer to their target, using radar blind spots and GPS spoofing against the very systems meant to stop them. At 6:15 in the morning, Ukrainian operators noticed a problem. The GPS of the second drone had completely failed. It wasn't caused by Russian jamming, but by a cheap Chinese capacitor that couldn't handle temperature changes. Without GPS, the drone automatically switched to inertial navigation, but over the sea, this system accumulates errors of 10 meters per minute. After drifting 8 kilometers off course, it was heading into open water instead of the target. By 6:45, it crashed into the sea. No explosion, just gone. Now only 2 drones remained. The third drone, about 5 kilometers behind, still had a functioning GPS, but not for long. The Russian spy ship was now fully active. Its mineral ME radar began scanning the western approaches, while the signals intelligence team went to work. Every electronic device emits tiny harmonic frequencies, ghost signals, when its circuits resonate, and the Russians knew how to exploit them. At 7:23, they detected a contact, bearing 285, moving at 180 kilometers per hour, 15 kilometers out. The ship's radar locked on. The lead drone's simple threat receiver picked up the signal, but its wooden frame confused the radar. The Mineral ME's algorithms expected sharp returns from metallic targets. Wood produced weak, inconsistent reflections. The radar kept losing lock. The operator reported an intermittent contact, possibly birds, and went back to tracking the decoy fleet. Meanwhile, the third FP-1 drone made a decision on its own. Its simple programming allowed it to react when detecting radar ahead. It shut down all electronics, relying only on its mechanical gyroscope, flying blind by compass heading. But running the electronic warfare system aboard the Russian ship created another issue. Its R-381T jammers, designed to disrupt naval drones, were emitting electromagnetic noise across multiple frequencies from 20 to 1,000 megahertz, right in the middle of the ship's communication band. Each time the jammers transmitted, they interfered with the ship's own radar, a problem Russian doctrine called electromagnetic fratricide, your own systems blinding each other. At 7:25, the ship ordered a patrol boat to investigate the faint contact. The boat accelerated to 35 knots. The crew manned the forward PKM machine gun. The gunner loaded a 200-round belt, checked his iron sights, and braced against the mount. The loader stood ready with 2 spare belts. They had practiced this hundreds of times, engaged low-flying targets at 500 meters, walked the tracers onto the target, fire continuously until splash. Standard protocol: investigate, identify, engage if hostile. But they had trained for metal drones with clear infrared signatures, not wooden ghosts like these. The lead drone had 3 minutes of fuel left. Behind it, the third drone kept flying invisible to radar, but without navigation. The morning fog was now so thick that visibility dropped to 500 meters. At 7:30, the lead FP-1 reached the target zone, about 15 miles off the coast of Novorossiysk. The Russian spy ship was exactly where expected, still directing 2 patrol boats that formed a radar fence around it. Each radar covered 120 degrees and could detect small targets the size of a suitcase from 15 kilometers away. But nature turned against them. That morning over the Black Sea, a temperature inversion formed warm air above cool air-bending radar beams upward like light through a prism. It's a common phenomenon in October. When the sea stays warm, but the morning air cools rapidly. This difference in density blinds radar at low altitudes. The radar beams were bending 15 degrees upward. On their screens, targets appeared at 50 meters altitude, but in reality the beams were scanning 80 meters high. Anything flying below 30 meters was completely invisible. The FP-1, flying just 3 meters above the surface, was essentially a submarine skimming the waves. At 7:32, the Russian radar kept scanning too high, so the drone slipped through unnoticed. A patrol boat finally spotted it visually only 500 meters away. The drone's onboard camera recorded everything. The boat growing larger, flashes of gunfire, bang. At 400 meters, the PKM's rapid fire echoed across the water. Tracer rounds skipped off the waves. 3 bullets pierced the wooden fuselage. 1 hit the propeller, shaking the engine violently. Damaged but still flying, the drone escaped the gunfire with only 90 seconds of fuel left. By 7:33, the spy ship's distinctive mast and antenna array appeared 800 meters ahead, but the damaged propeller had cracked the engine mount, reducing thrust. The patrol boat radioed, "Drone inbound, bearing 285, damaged but still flying." On the bridge, Russian officers grabbed binoculars, scanning south where the patrol boat had pointed, but they should have looked northwest. Because at that moment, the third FP-1, the last one, was approaching from the northwest, 10 meters above the waves, flying at 180 kilometers per hour, emerging from the thick fog. At 7:34, the lead drone's engine finally seized, and it began its final glide down toward the sea. The lead drone had done its job perfectly. As it plunged into the water, every Russian eye focused on it, unaware that the real threat was already closing in. The spy ship's radar couldn't tilt below -5 degrees. Its designers never imagined an attack could come from such a low angle. The patrol boats were out of position, and the bridge crew was looking the wrong way. Then, within seconds, a Russian lookout spotted the third drone by eye, only 300 meters away too late. The drone's camera had already locked onto the bridge roof, where 3 special antennas were mounted. In less than a second, The 25-kilogram drone slammed into the antenna base and detonated, obliterating the entire bridge. The R-381T antennas, capable of intercepting radio signals as far as Romania, melted into slag. The computers that stored 6 weeks of drone activity data were incinerated. The Mineral ME radar array was twisted into molten metal. Secondary explosions ripped through the power systems, and the fires raged for 18 hours before dying out. When the smoke cleared, the ship's once sophisticated radar suite looked like a warped Salvador Dali painting. 6 weeks of intelligence, dozens of recorded drone launches, and the patterns that could have ended Ukraine's drone war all gone. The ship would sail again, but its electronic eyes and ears were permanently blind. Within hours, Ukraine launched new drones from new sites, using new patterns invisible once again. The Russians kept striking former launch zones, but now they were hitting empty fields. All the data, all the patterns, all the hard-earned intelligence erased. The battle ended for now. The war did not.